Now to this breaking news we're just getting from the Supreme Court, a decision in the case of Childs versus Salazar. This is a case challenging Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for minors on First Amendment grounds. Let's bring in MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. Fallon, tell us about the decision in this case.
Yeah, Anna, this is one of those big decisions that we've been waiting for all spring. The justices here are finding that Colorado's law regulates free speech. This case involves talk therapy, specifically talk therapy. And they're saying that because it regulates free speech, it's subject to the strict scrutiny of First Amendment free speech protections. And because the lower courts here did not hold it to the high enough, strict enough scrutiny here, that they were incorrect. And of course, those lower courts sided with Colorado. So the justices here reversing that. This is an 8-1 decision. Justice Gorsuch writing the majority opinion. And the only dissent here is actually Justice Jackson. There are a few concurring opinions, but right here, the court 8-1 saying that this Colorado law regulates free speech and therefore must be subject to strict scrutiny. Anna?
Fallon Gallagher, will let you continue to read in. I also want to bring in MS Now's Lisa Rubin and legal analyst Catherine Christian. Lisa, an 8-1 decision really leaving no question about where the court stands here, even though lower courts had ruled for the state, for Colorado in this case. What's your reaction to this decision?
You know, I think for anyone who's shocked by the direction that the court took in this, I would recommend to them to read Justice Kagan's concurrence, which I just had an opportunity to look at, because that really presents the real issue before this court, which is that the law didn't just regulate the contents of speech, it regulated viewpoint. What she's saying is Colorado, by banning therapists from talking about the possibility of conversion therapy or therapy that would help them redirect their sexual urges, but by allowing them to support, for example, gender-affirming care, on the other hand, is expressing a clear viewpoint and siding on one side of the issue versus the other. And Justice Kagan says, look, consider if Colorado's law was the mirror image of that. It would still be constitutionally offensive. This would be a much closer call, Justice Kagan says, if this were viewpoint neutral and instead just regulated a subject matter of speech that is forbidden, for example, in doctors' offices. That would be a much tougher call. Justice Kagan may be signaling to other states that have a concern about things like conversion therapy. There is a way potentially to do this that wouldn't trigger this 8-1 divide that you see among this court. What's offensive here is that you are telling people of one viewpoint that they can't express it while expressly endorsing the other viewpoint as permissible within the space of talk therapy, for example, Anna.
Well, and Catherine, the state had argued that this form of therapy, conversion therapy, was conduct. It was a form of treatment versus being about free speech. Clearly, the court didn't buy that argument.
No, because talk therapy, as defined at what this counselor is doing, did not involve medication, did not involve any physical intervention. It was basically her speech. Clearly, if she was giving out medication saying this will cure you of being gay, that would be medical practice. But here, this counselor was just expressing, as Lisa said, her viewpoint, which is a violation of the First Amendment to restrict that.
But Catherine raises a good point, Anna, that I think is worth pointing out to our viewers. This challenge brought by the counselor here is what's called an as-applied challenge. She's not saying that the law is per se unconstitutional because it does also regulate conduct. There is medical therapy that's at issue here. Colorado can continue to ban that form of conversion therapy. What they can't do is regulate speech. The government of Colorado made the argument at oral argument and in their briefs that speech was somehow incidental here to conduct. And so to the extent that their law sort of aimed at speech that goes on in between talk therapy and a patient, that wasn't really what the primary objective was. And the court says it doesn't really matter what your primary objective is. As applied to this particular petitioner, this is not valid.
I mean, there are 25 other states in the U.S. that have a similar law to Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for people under age 18. So Catherine, what happens next in these states?
Well, if it targets speech, as it did in this case, then it will not be valid anymore. If it targets medication, physical intervention, that's different. So it can't be just targeted at the counselor's speech. that is a violation of the First Amendment.
Ladies, stay with me. I want to bring in Leah Littman, professor of law at the University of Michigan Law School. Again, this was ultimately a free speech case. Leah, so how did the court find Mrs. Child's First Amendment rights were violated by this law?
It is a free speech case, but I think it's important to recognize that in this instance, the free speech, the speech of the therapist, is a form of treatment. That is what medical professionals do in this setting. And that is why Colorado argued that it could restrict the form of treatment that this medical professional offer. Now, I understand, of course, that this law reflects a viewpoint. Basically, the law told the counselor that she can affirm someone's gender identity. If they say, I am transgender, she can say, that's good, that's fine, let me help you with the transition. She can't, however, say, well, let me kind of adjust you back to your sex assigned at birth, and that's fine too. And again, that is a viewpoint, but it is a viewpoint that recognizes transgender individuals exist, that gender identity is real. And I just don't know that you can really separate that viewpoint from the conduct of medical treatment or a professional. Imagine, for example, that a state tells a doctor, you can't tell someone with an eating disorder, yes, you should eat less, right? You are right to think that you are too thin. That too is regulating a form of speech. It is regulating speech in the form of medical treatment. And I think part of the concern with the majority opinion is that it understates the extent to which talk therapy and therapy is inevitably going to be a form of speech, and that this Colorado law was designed to recognize the importance of recognizing transgender individuals. And there's a deep irony to the court releasing this opinion, which suggests the state is impermissibly reflecting a particular viewpoint that trans people exist on Transgender Day of Visibility.
Well, and I know Colorado had enacted this law again back in 2019 is when it went into effect, hasn't imposed any penalties against Childs or others when it comes to conversion therapy, talk therapy involving this law. But they put forward this law because of potential harm that medical institutions found this type of therapy could cause. According to 2020's American Journal of Public Health findings, LGBTQ plus youth who underwent conversion therapy were more than twice as likely to report having attempted suicide than those who did not. And according to a study from the American Psychologist Association in 2021, conversion therapy was also associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Did the court address those findings in their decision today? And what do you see as the potential path forward here? What's next?
It really did not address those findings. It instead focused on characterizing the law as regulating speech and the law as reflecting a particular viewpoint. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's sole dissent did focus on the harmful effects of conversion therapy. My guess is states like Colorado will attempt to reformulate and reframe their laws so that the laws aren't categorized as viewpoint discrimination. They might come back and say, for example, licensed medical professionals cannot offer a form of treatment that falls below accepted professional standards of care. That doesn't necessarily reflect a particular viewpoint about gender identity or sexuality. But the reality is, in effect, that is going to do the same thing as this Colorado law that the court just struck down, because it falls below professional standards of care for licensed therapists to counsel people to disregard and deny their gender identity.